From actors to writers, directors, and special effects, there's a lot of hard work that goes into making a movie, but sometimes even with all hands on deck, it's still tough to shoot certain scenes. So here are some of the incredibly hard to film shots that had the team questioning everything. Now, it won't be a video on difficult shots if I don't add the greatest Alfred Hitchcock in it, and this time I'm talking about his 1960 film, Psycho. Those of you who have seen it, I bet you were mesmerized by Marion's death stare. Well, as it turns out, it wasn't an easy one to film.
Hey, Miss Charlie.
She looked like a wrong one to you?
Acted like one.
The only funny thing, she paid me $700 in cash.
Now, we know that Hitchcock is particularly famous for his impressive shots and beautiful direction, but there were some places where our man was stumped as well. And one particular moment happened while he was filming Psycho, especially when Janet Leigh's character Marion is getting murdered. Now, before this, we saw her get brutally stabbed and fall to the ground, and after that, the camera shifts to her eyes and stops there. Now, one would imagine that they'd have to use a photograph or a still for that, but in case you didn't know, that's not the way Alfred Hitchcock rolls. Nope, the very much alive Janet had to portray a dead woman, and that too with her eyes. Yeah, I can't even imagine how she went about that, cause like as the camera panned out, Janet had to hold her dead gaze, while making sure that her body won't so much as flinch for the whole scene. Not gonna lie, this scene alone should have been enough to land her an Oscar, but sadly, it only got her a nomination. Hey, at least she gets to have her name go down in history, so maybe it's not all that bad. Now, usually directors go after saving the budget when it comes to making a movie, but that's far from what was going on in Stanley Kubrick's mind when he directed The Shining, especially the iconic "It's Johnny" scene. You know, the one that showed Jack Torrance using an axe to slice through a toilet door to get to his wife.
Here's Johnny.
Yikes, it gives me the chills just thinking about it. Well, can you guess how many doors the actor, Jack Nicholson, had to slice to get that perfect take? 60. That's right. Now that's a whole lot of doors, don't you think? And get this, it took them 3 whole days to finish this scene. That much I believe. But what was the problem? Well, here's the thing. Nicholson had actually trained as a fire marshal, so I guess you could say that he was a bit too good at chopping doors. And what Kubrick was looking for was a sloppy cut, so he made the actor do it 60 times. I guess it was worth it in the end, because that scene became the face of the film. Speaking of, we all know Star Wars has got quite a lot of difficult shots, but there were some that took the cake. You know the scenes that show the fictional planet Hoth? Well, they were all filmed in Finse, Norway. Oh yeah, the team had to travel back and forth, but that's not what made this difficult. At one point, the crew had to film in an actual blizzard. Why did they go through all this? Well, these conditions were perfect for depicting the harsh conditions of the planet. And while they might have been perfect for the movie, they weren't that good for the cast, especially Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker in the film.
Take these two over to the garage, will you? I want them cleaned up before dinner.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Hamill had to rely on his costume for warmth, and as you probably have guessed, they weren't all too practical. After all, the costume was designed to look good on screen, not as a protection against a blizzard, so I guess it really does take a village, and some uncomfortable suits to shoot the best movie scenes sometimes. Now, let's recall The Usual Suspects' laughter scene for a second. This scene was pretty hard to get right, for 2 reasons. Firstly, in the police lineup scene, the actors were actually supposed to be all serious, but apparently actor Benicio del Toro farted 12 times during the scene.
How many keys, you cocksucker?
In English, please.
Excuse me.
And naturally, it led everyone to laugh uncontrollably. This leads me to my second point. Instead of going for another take, they kept it in the movie. Why? Because apparently it gave the screenwriter Christopher McQuarrie a solution to one of his plot problems. You see, he was having a tough time showing the natural bond between the crooks, and well, the unscripted laughter helped him do just that. So I guess maybe not all scenes are hard to shoot. Sometimes you just gotta air out the tension, you know? Now, while ad-libs are fun and all, did you know Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker skillfully catching Mary Jane and her lunch tray was awfully hard to get right?
Wow, great reflexes.
I mean, it took hours and hours to film it, and they did use some glue on the hands to make sure the tray won't move. But apart from that, it's all legit. Tobey actually caught all the things just like that. Honestly, I can't even imagine the hard work that went into pulling something like that off. But I guess when a director like Quentin Tarantino's the one pulling the strings, things do tend to be sorta easy, like the nightclub sequence in the movie Kill Bill. Now, instead of going for the more common approach, where directors only focus on the actor, Tarantino went crazy with his Steadicam shots. That shot showed everything, under, over, around, and through the set. Everything is open to the audience to take it all in. And well, this sort of openness and transparency also required a lot of rehearsal. So it took them 6 hours to rehearse just that shot, which by the way was only 2 minutes long. Rumor has it that the much experienced Steadicam operator, Larry McConkey, collapsed from exhaustion after the 17th take. But hey, the shot that came out of it was just beautiful, and that's to be expected from Tarantino. Now, we've talked about Kubrick, Hitchcock, and Tarantino. I bet you're wondering, where's Nolan? Well, how about we end this video with him? And while I'm sure he'll be blowing away our minds with his upcoming work, Oppenheimer, there's one scene that I think deserves all the awards. Remember that amazing fighting sequence from Inception? Yep, the one where we saw Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character fighting a bunch of guards. Well, of course, it wasn't just that. Since the fight was taking place in a dream within a dream, things got a little twisty. Yup, gravity was shifting all around them. Now, you'd imagine that they'd film all of that using VFX or CGI. And you're right, that's the rational way to go about it. But turns out that's not what Nolan thought. Why doesn't that surprise me? The entire thing was actually shot on a rotating set. It was actually pretty similar to the one that was used when filming 2001: A Space Odyssey. There were a lot of big motor-operated metal rings involved, and in order to perfectly capture the action, the crew had to install cameras pretty much everywhere. The ceiling, the floor, the walls, you name it. Oh, and they had to make sure that they didn't sacrifice the lighting in any way during this entire sequence. I can't imagine being a part of the crew for this scene. And as for Gordon-Levitt, well, it's a wonder he made it through it. The poor guy had only 2 weeks to practice the fight choreography, which was no walk in the park. But add in a revolving set? Now that could be a recipe for disaster. But somehow they managed to do it pretty well. With that being said, it's a wrap for the incredibly difficult scenes to shoot in movies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.